And joining me for this interview are three amazingly talented men who have played or are currently playing the character of Melchior in Spring Awakening. First, of the Vendela cast is Jair Hips. Jair is a senior music theater major from Brooklyn, New York. You may have seen him with BWMT as Jeremy here in Be More Chill at Playhouse Square, or as Eugene Williams in the Scottsboro Boys at the Beck Center. Welcome, Jair.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Next, of the Moritz cast is Eric Siegel, a senior music theater major from Tacoma, Washington. Eric's favorite BWMT productions include Once, in collaboration with the Beck Center, and Cabaret. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
And finally, we are thrilled to have with us today Zach Adkins. Zach is a native of Ohio from Ashtabula and a 2015 graduate of BWMT. In 2012, he was part of the collaboration with the Beck Center of Spring Awakening. You may know Zach from his time on the first national tour of Kinky Boots or his Broadway stint in Anastasia. And most recently, he has been filming his new Broadway gig, Diana, for streaming on Netflix. Welcome, Zach.
Fancy. You make it sound way more fancy than it is, but I appreciate that.
Well, welcome.
I'm going to keep you around. This is good. Yeah.
Well, and I see that we have a great audience joining us today, and I want to welcome all of you today, whether you are fans of BWMT or current students or alumni. We are thrilled to have you join us. And you have the opportunity to ask questions of these guests today. And there is a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen where you can submit questions. And in just a little bit, we'll start to include some audience questions as well. If you haven't gotten your tickets yet for the streaming of Spring Awakening, you can do so at the website conversation.bw.edu. Also at that website are the first two installments of this conversation series that is entitled Those You've Known. So I think we've taken care of all of that business. And without further ado, I'm going to turn to asking some questions of our guests. And the first one is, what does it mean to come into your own as a young man in 2020, or Zach, in your case, in 2012? And how does it feel the same, and how is it different than coming of age in 1891 when this show is set?
I'll hop on that. Being the one closer to 18, what did you say, 1891?
Yeah.
What is the difference for me personally? I was thinking about this question, and when I did this my freshman year at BW, and Instagram came out in 2011. For me, I got it in 2011. There's no TikTok, there's no Twitter, and I think like saying coming of age, it's a relative thing. I don't think I've come into my own yet. It's something you're always kind of reaching for as a person, especially in 2020. But I think the biggest takeaway from the difference, other than the mediums we're using, of film versus on stage, that you are so much more connected now. You could take a few days to figure out what's going on in the headlines of the news. You know, I wasn't on Instagram promoting things constantly or on TikTok trying to do that. You know, we are performing for ourselves constantly. And I think back in 2012, we were just stepping into that whole idea of self-promotion. That's kind of what I'm thinking about.
Great, thank you, Zach.
Yeah, I'll continue. I think just the different types of responsibilities I think that we have in 2020 as opposed to 1890s. Like it is so different what it means to be a man, I think, and how we can align ourselves and who we become with that image and these responsibilities that we have. And I think that it's not as tough. It's not as tough. You don't have to be as tough as you once were. Way back a long time ago, I think it was always about strength, and the man is the head honcho, the leader of his family, the leader of the world. And I think we have different responsibilities these days because that is not the case anymore. It should have never been the case, but it's up to us to start listening a whole lot more and making that a part of who we become and a part of understanding our place in the world. And even though we have an important responsibility to grow up to do things, it doesn't mean just listen all the time. It means that we can't think of ourselves as head honchos anymore, as the end all be all for the world, because we're not. And so, yeah, it's been more important than ever just to kind of to take in and not assume that you are it. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, piggybacking on what Eric said, because I was thinking the same thing. I mean, they definitely had values of like, you're the breadwinner, that's what being a man was, and was confined into that little space. But I think for me, coming into my own is kind of more understanding my values and what I believe and what that means to me and how that impacts others. And when you're really strongly rooted in what you believe, I think that's what coming into your own really, like, once you have your values that you're sticking to. And I mean, for Melchior, it's kind of like he believes 100% of what he wants to do and what he pursues, which is his knowledge, which he's always bat down at, at every turn, but because they desire to keep him ignorant because that was their values. Do you believe what I tell you because I'm telling it to you? But I think we have the power to 100% go for what we believe in ourselves, and that's what coming into our own means now.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I think what really stuck with me about Melchior is that he is the one pushing all the boundaries in the show. He's the one that is reaching out to people and that wants to figure things out for himself about women and about the world. But yeah, going back to what Eric said, gender stereotypes, Melchior is pushing his stereotypes for that decade, right? So what you guys said is perfect. That's awesome.
And I think he learned something along the way, because he is very incredibly progressive for his time. But I'm not gonna spoil things because we're not getting.
Who hasn't seen Spring Awakening yet?
Right, like,
Everyone's seen it, right?
At this point, if you haven't, I mean, he ends up falling for Wendla a little bit. He becomes interested in this girl Wendla, and something that I don't know if he always thinks. He's such a big supporter of co-ed schools, like of boys and girls being able to be able to learn together. And through a conversation with her and seeing who she is, he's able to realize that she is someone that also thinks this way, and also and it kind of opens his mind to I think he feels so alone in this world of being like the one person who's progressive, but just talking to her. And what I think makes him fall for her a little bit is the fact that she also she wants these same things. She thinks these same ways, and it's kind of a moment of like, wow, this is the future, is everyone being able to sit at the table and have these equal opportunities of being able to control what's going on with the world. Yeah. And so yeah, he learns throughout the whole, I think, first act and is able to continue to develop his progressive thoughts and his progressive outlook on life.
I think the best example that happens in the show is when Moritz runs away to it's at the arts camp, right? The commune that he goes to find, and before he kills himself. Those are what they do to the progressives of that age. They send them away to a camp and go be an artist in this camp, you know. And she's getting away from that terrible abusive parental situation, and that's what happens to people who want to go against the grain in that time. They send them out to the woods. They're like, okay, go camp for the rest of your life. And that's like pretty much what you were just saying, Eric. Yeah, it's like all wrapped up into that.
Yeah.
Great. What was it like to perform such an intimate show in the midst of COVID-19?
That's for you two.
Yeah.
But for everybody watching, before we got on camera, I was asking them, there's a certain scene where they have to be a little more unclothed than normal. And I was wondering what the close-up situation was. I was nervous about doing it on stage. So you guys, come on, tell me about this intimate situation y'all did.
I'm going to let you start here. Yeah.
Well, so going off of that, the intimacy in terms of like the physical intimacy, I won't give anything away, but I will say that it was reimagined into a way that fits right now. And by right now, like not like 21st century, like 2020 specifically, because let's just say that what you think that you have seen in Spring Awakening is not something that you will see for our Spring Awakening, but it means something just as poignant. And I think that was really good on Vicky's account in terms of like, let's remaster this to make it make sense for right now, because we can't, obviously be touching, you can't have a sex scene amidst COVID. But in terms of intimacy in other ways, yeah, it was challenging because when you're in a room with somebody, you feel like the energy is tangible, like from your other actors. So like for Totally Fucked or like Bitch of Living, you're getting that pent up energy from everybody in the room. And like for the most part, for some of the scenes, you don't really get the energy in person. So that kind of ends up being frustrating. But what we did to remedy that kind of aspect is for our confessionals. They are about this close to your face. So once you get that close, you're seeing everything that this person is feeling, every inner thought, everything that they're not vocalizing to you, everything that they're screaming at you is right in your face. And so I think the intimacy for the audience is going to carry through really well in that space, because you can't get away from us if we're this close to you. You can't.
What is a confessional, Jahir?
So a confessional is for our songs, since we couldn't sing, near each other, because that's the worst thing that you can do for the virus, we would record it in our own homes background. And like, if I have my phone like this, around this close to my face. So confessional style is you sing directly to the camera, and then it's edited together so that we're all singing at the same time. And,
Oh, cool. Okay, cool.
But what's interesting about it is you can craft your own, you really have to craft your own inner life, because that's exactly what's happening right in front. Like you can't hide behind or in front or around anything. It's right here. And I think
that's so cool.
Really something that you might not get if it was a normal on stage production.
What was the challenge for you guys when you are filming so close to your face, having to tone things down to make it more acceptable for film? Was that challenging to like draw it back after like having all this energy on stage for the group numbers, right? You guys did them as a group, but then your confessionals, did you have to find, like, you had to bring it back a little bit to like make it work for this little box that's surrounding your face? Was that challenging?
Absolutely. It was really challenging, I think, because I mean, I've done theater all my life, and this is movie-esque most, without saying movie. It is being on camera. We've done classes before, but really just kind of being able to like sit there and look at yourself for how many hours it takes to film these and just be like, that is, I don't know. It was strange, and but it was so cool. Like I think the first couple I was doing, because the first ones I was like back here myself, and then I was maybe like right here or something. And so we got notes, and we kind of figured out what worked best for each one of us individually. But kind of once you got in a groove, you're like, oh hey, we're right back at it. Next song, like next scene, and it kind of got more comfortable as we progressed. And yeah, I would say with what Jair has said a little bit about kind of developing our own inner life and our own character is kind of, you since you're looking at it, you're always like, oh, I don't know if this is, I'm so close to myself and I'm seeing everything that's going on in my head, because I know what is supposed to be going on in my head. And when I watch it back, I'm like, is that happening? Can other people see it? I don't know. Like I've been told that tone it down maybe just a little bit more when you're on camera as opposed to going crazy on stage. Yeah. And it's kind of finding that inner life and knowing what you want when you're filming it. And I find that my best takes throughout this have been the ones where I just kind of, I realize, I picture what I want, and I stick to it, and I don't try to impress. So,
well, I'm happy it was you guys, because if it was me, I'd be standing there for hours doing one scene over and over and over again.
I mean, I definitely spent a couple hours on a couple.
That's why that's why we do theater, right? If you mess it up, you mess it up, but you have to keep going. But in film, it's like you mess up, let's go back.
Well, and I think that you have answered one of the audience questions from Julie was, how was it to film Spring Awakening versus doing it on stage? Was there anything that you missed or anything that you gained that you haven't talked about yet?
For me, I will say something that we gained that you can't do with live theater is all of the places that we went to, all of the like locations throughout Ohio that we traveled to and filmed in. And we went, Eric and I were in a cemetery on Halloween on a full moon, and we were like, the spirits were here, but we were there too. And it was cool. I mean, I really enjoyed it, and I think it's going to show when it comes out that puts a little bit of realism into it. Feel like it's a part of the film world that we don't really get to touch in terms of music theater performers. So I was really grateful to get that aspect.
I think something that I miss with doing just a live show and doing live theater is that it always changes. It changes all the time, and I think that's something that I did miss with this show. But at the same time, there were so many. Vicky did such a good job of finding ways to not just make this a film, or not just make this a virtual film recorded thing like that's be recorded forever, but also kind of add a lot of the theater aspects. And she found a good balance between making it the best of both worlds. And yeah, being able to just go to all these locations like Jair is saying, and it was cool. It was really neat. And it was a lot of like, oh, wake up on Saturday morning and let's go across the lake and film it and shoot a scene. And you're going to be running for a couple hours or doing all this other stuff. So, yeah, it was really fun. It was super fun. It wasn't all just right up at the, like super close. It was a lot of movement. And there are dance numbers in the show that you're going to see. And so it was a lot of both. It wasn't just one thing, and I really liked that a lot. But
that's so interesting. Huh.
We have a question from Stephen in the audience, that what was the process to figure out these locations? How did you know exactly where you could work and what would help tell the story in this way?
that was a lot with for Vicky and Matt. They were able to, ahead of time, they put together like a plan of oh, how can we use this space, or what is the best spot, what is going to tell. There are a lot of locations where we're doing a scene and it's just our face. All the scene work is pretty much going to be similar to the confessionals where it's close up, but a lot of moments we needed to just have, you need to look at the video for a second and kind of get what's going on and know what's going on. And they had a really good plan of finding a bunch of different locations that worked, that made you kind of understand where you are immediately. So it's not just the same similar backdrop. We're able to kind of move you around this world because it's not just one location that it's being taken place in. And I think they did a really good job with finding those locations. And I'm excited to see how they put it all together because I've not seen it yet. But yeah.
Great. There's a question, another audience question from Michaela. Is there a certain part of Melchior that you found or discovered in yourself?
I mean, the one thing I really love about Melchior is after all of these terrible things happened to him, you know, in the version I was trying to play, me and my Venla were very close, almost love-like, and more infatuated with each other than a typical way you would play Spring Awakening. But there was just like, it's always such an interesting thing to watch a person lose everything in their life, and then they get to the cemetery at the end, no spoilers, but he chooses to soldier on. And despite all of the people he loves, you know, in Spring's Awakening, when they meet in the graveyard, Moritz comes back and urges him to kill himself. It's not a situation where they tell him to go on in life like the musical. Maybe, we don't know, spoilers, but I always really admired the fact that when you're faced with the choice of being with those people you love, wherever they may be on the other side, or staying the path and saying that I'm going to make the best of what I have right now, that's a part of Melchior that's always kind of stuck with me.
I totally agree. I mean, Melchior at that moment, it's not, and you know, it's not like sometimes the diluted optimism that you'll get from some music theater. It's realistic, push through optimism. Like, I'm not okay, but there will be one day where I will be. And that much is enough to carry me through what I'm going right now. I mean, the lyrics, you know, things are happening. People have died. And he's like, I walk now with them. I call on their names. I'll see their thoughts are known. Like, he's, just because what the people above him have failed him, that does not stop him from traversing that and keep and going on and pushing through, even for the people who can't push through anymore because the system has completely failed them. You know, Melchior was really, like these guys have said earlier, really grateful to have been in the more liberal household. Like, he can read Faust and his mom's not gonna backslap him, you know, like he had that kind of trust in his household where some characters didn't, and it showed towards the end. But he was always one to protect and always one to try to guide. And even in his bitter end moments when he is downtrodden, doesn't feel like it anymore, he perks back up and does it anyway. And yeah, I think that's really admirable.
I think going off of that, I think he knows, because he's lived in this, he was brought up this way, and he's such a great thinker and such a great progressive. He knows he has, like you said, he almost has a responsibility to see the world. He knows things that other people don't. And that is something that I think he realizes throughout the show, that he has a responsibility to the world to share the thoughts of other people in his life that couldn't voice what they were feeling, didn't have an opportunity to live their life and see their dreams through and see their desires through, and he has that responsibility to basically just speak for his friends when they are not going to be able to be heard, when they are not able to voice their opinions, voice their thoughts. And so I think that's a huge part of this character, and a huge part of something that I feel like I've taken away. And another thing is that I think that what was I going to say? Oh,
it's okay. I did that a few minutes ago.
Back to me. I'm gonna lost my train of thought.
It's Monday. It's a hard day all the way around. I lost my train of thought too. We just laugh about it. It's all good.
Well, this connects a bit with a question from David, and he asks, what values from Spring Awakening do you hope to see in future generations? And he does give an applause for BWMT being a shining light in the world, because it is so needed. So to answer David's question, what are the values that you hope to see coming forth in the future generations?
Education. That's where I'm going to go. This is what we need to educate ourselves on topics that are important for our day-to-day lives, which now more than ever, you just need to be educated about where you're getting your news, how you're getting your news. And that's what I want to see in the new generation or the next generation, is an understanding of how to sift through things that aren't true and how to move forward in a way that isn't going to lead us to be against everyone that we meet. I don't know if that makes sense. That's what I'm trying to get. It's a hard thing to talk about, we talk about it so aggressively all the time, is, how are we going to come back together as a country? And I think the next generation is very smart and very on it and can call bullshit very quickly, more so than any generation before them. And I think that's why a lot of the time, when you have them pushing against, political leaders in our country, they do it really well and better than anybody else I've ever seen. So, the future is bright, because I think people are realizing that a problem doesn't have to be your problem for it to matter to other people. When you vote, I hope you vote for everyone, not just what benefits you. And I think that's really what encapsulates the younger generation.
I think going off that, listening to the youth is just so important, because I think that we have good things to say, and people younger than me also have good things to say, that a lot of the older generation kind of gets complacent in their old thoughts that are antique by now, that don't have any bearing on where we really are as a society. Change is inevitable. And so I think when we speak up about it and really desire things to change, we can get into the hatred in people's hearts and change that from the outside in when they actually listen. I mean, it shows in the show, because Melchior ends up with two people who he loves dearly gone. And that's what happens when the youth is not listened to. When they have ideas and ideals that are against anything that the youth could possibly say, and they're beaten down to the point where they can't move or can't breathe. People are dying today for no reason, because people hate to listen, hate to change their ideas. I speak from a different point of view, and as a Black man, there are a lot of people who will not take me seriously, will never listen to me, will always see me as something that I'm not, that I never present, because of the way that they think. And until they decide to listen, there's no changing that inside of them. So I think listening to the youth, like Zach said, listening to the people who are trying to make a difference and who are good at it going forward, I think is what we need to be doing and what we can learn from Spring Awakening.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also, this message, the show is all about of listening. I think just honestly listening across the board is listening to the youth. They have important things to say, but also the youth, it needs to be a reminder that the youth of this day and age and like the next generation, each generation that comes before is more willing to listen than the last. And it's not 1890s. And I just think like growing up when I had problems with like, I was like, oh man, girl problems. I don't know how to talk to you. I can't talk to my parents. It's weird. But I think the second that I started opening up to them and I started remembering that I'm not remembering that it wasn't the 1890s, not like I had this show growing up for something that I was doing in my life, but it is just when I needed to talk to someone, they were there. And pretty soon I plan to have kids someday, and I hope that my kids will be able to trust me to listen to them. And so it's kind of sending a message to the upper generation, the generation that came before us, but also a message for ourselves to get that we need to continue to listen all the way through. And that's what this show, I think, is all about, is just being open, being able to listen no matter who you are. And keep in mind that someday you may be the thing that I'm not saying I despise the older generation or anything like that. Love you, Grandma. I love you. But
hey, what's up, Eric's grandma?
Yeah, I know. You will become a grandfather someday. I mean, if you want to have kids, you may become a grandfather, and you may be put in a situation where you are the older generation. And what are you going to do about it? How are you going to make it different? So, yeah.
Listening is like this magical little key to open this treasure of insight. It really is.
Totally.
We'll take a couple more audience questions here. What was your favorite scene and your favorite song to perform?
I'm gonna let you guys go first. Oh, look at you, have to think harder. I've had time to ruminate, I guess. My favorite song is All That's Known, which is Melchior's first solo song. I thought the way we did it was the first time you saw the microphones in our show. It was right out of this really great scene with my Moritz, and we went, I don't know if anyone's ever seen our production, but we made a lot of structural changes in pacing. The show is very fast and on the head. And so that was my favorite song because I love that song. I'm sure you guys feel the same. Also, like the end of Bitch of Living, when Melchior gets to sing that little tacit at the end, I always felt so cool doing that. Like I felt like the coolest guy. Also, we had staircases going down from the stage, and that was like the first time I got to like go down and sit on the stairs and get in people's faces. And I was like 18 doing that, and I was like, this is so cool. Is this theater all the time? It's not. And then and then I think my favorite scene is the one, guys help me out. It's the scene right before their first love song. Do you guys know which one I'm talking about? When he's like, sit back and think for a while.
Oh, Mirror Blue Night.
No, not Mirror Blue Night. It's their first love song.
Oh,
right. Big scene right before it. Words of a Bot. Yes, that's my favorite scene. It's this amazing like dance of like two people who don't know how to flirt, but Melchior's so smart that he's just like, just sit for a bit, sit with me. Why don't you just sit and we can talk about something? And he just like slowly eases her into the conversation. And I love that song because it's like all the things they're not saying to each other. It's all in their head. What would happen if I touched someone's hands? And I love that stuff. I felt it compelling to do. What do you guys like?
I think the song that I mean, I love the song. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. But the song I've had the most like love-hate relationship with, I think, was "Left Behind."
I love that song. Yeah.
It's such a beautiful.
You know, my biggest note they kept giving me during that is like, Zach, stop crying. Nobody wants to see you cry on stage. Stop. Well, that was a good lesson, though. We all know if you're over emoting in a song, the audience will pull back from you. But if you give them just enough like door opening, they'll like lean into it. So that was my big lesson from that Left Behind was how do I float these notes and make it sound like pretty? And then how do I not get myself worked up? But I will say our production, though, when Moritz goes and kills himself, we're all on stage. We never left the set. So we were all out there for the entire show. No one ever left, except there was specific times where Melchior and Venla were left alone. But all the other times, everyone was sitting. There was a raised platform in the middle of our stage, and they sat all the way around it, and we watched each other do everything. So when Moritz kills himself, we're all facing upstage, and I had to prepare myself to do Left Behind while facing upstage, staring at the pit with all the musicians, just like staring dead in the violinist's face. And I'm like slowly getting all choked up. Anyway, I'll let you finish, Eric. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, man.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it was the toughest song to get down. I think I spent the most time with it. I think it took me multiple hours because I was just sitting there, and it is such an emotional song, and it is hard looking at your tape and you do it, and then you're like, oh, like that sounded great, like oh my gosh, that sounds so good, like no, I'm just kidding, but like, you know, you watch it back and you're like, I didn't like it and I don't know why, and then you do it again and you're like, I still don't like it, and then after like tape 14, 15, you're like, what is wrong? And you're like, oh, you're making it about it's such a beautiful song, and it's so fun to sing because it is so floaty and it sounds so good, and
yeah,
but you start to realize, I think after I started to realize after so many times of doing it over and over again, I was like, man, no matter how many times I try to like sing this as beautifully as I possibly can, I just don't like it, and I'm not happy with it, and so it is a song I think that's taught me a lot about putting what is happening before just in the world of the story, and not what is happening in just like my voice. And so that is something I didn't start liking the takes that I was doing until I just kind of stopped really singing and just kind of speaking. Not necessarily speaking, but I don't think the tape that I ended up using or sending to be edited was my best singing tape at all by any means. But it is the one where I was just like, that was better, and it didn't sound as good, but I just don't know why, but I trust it more, and just kind of being able to trust that it's not about making it as beautiful as possible. It is about something more, because I don't know. I think when you sing something pretty, you can hear it back and you're like, oh man, that sounds pretty good. But when you watch yourself act, you're like, I can't really tell if that's good because no one has given me feedback on it. It's not an immediate response back to it. And so I think just having to trust the footage that you eventually take, that one that makes you smile, the one that makes you feel like it was the right one, and just putting it in, that song has taught me all about that. And that was a tough one. That was a tough one to get through.
Well, I'll tell you what, the older you get, you'll always learn that the first take on a self-tape or on this situation, it's always going to be the best take. It's always going to be your best. That's what I've learned over the years. It's like when you don't go in planning everything and working it out, that is the most real you'll be. So I don't know if that applied to you guys, but that definitely applies when I'm doing self-tapes or I'm sending a video to somebody. It's usually the first take that I'm like, nah, it never gets better than that one, does it? So
I think it goes that way for the most part because that's your most organic thing. Your first take is always going to be your most organic, no matter how hard you try to, because after that you look at it and then you have your first take in your mind for your second take. Mm-hmm. And now you've added something on top of what was just your base. So, I mean, Left Behind for me was interesting because Zach, you're right. Like they don't want to see you cry. What they really want to see is you trying not to cry.
Yeah,
That's
the withholding.
right.
Yes.
That's what's interesting. If you blubber in their face, they're like, okay, you can cry, but like how much more interesting and hard is it to see Melchior trying to pull himself together for Moritz's mother and father, you know?
Yeah.
When that was his best friend, when he could be super indulgent and be like, this is the worst day ever for me, when it's like, no, it's not. So like when we were filming it, like I don't know, after or before we had done the confessionals, when we were actually filming it, I made it a really uh, a point in my head to look at Laura and Lynn, who were playing Moritz's
I
parents.
know them. They're in the show. See,
Yeah.
things I don't know. We're learning everything together. All
Yeah.
you watching at home, it's Laura and Lynn. I actually did the show with Laura in 2012, but
Oh.
I did Shakespeare with Lynn many years later, 2 years later.
Wow.
Anyway, keep going.
No, I love them. They're so great. I went to Boise.
That's cool. Lynn is very scary, right? We're talking about Lynn Berg, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Horrifying. He played Richard III for our Shakespeare bus. He was Richard III in Richard III the year I did it. And he was so scary. I've never seen a Richard III like that.
You gotta see his Brutus.
Oh, I'm gonna go see it. I'm gonna see what's up.
Well, before we wrap up our conversation, I do have one more question, and I apologize that we haven't been able to get to all of the audience questions, but I do want to give an opportunity, Zach, for you to share what wisdom you have with Eric and Jair and any of the other students on this call that are aspiring to this profession. What words of wisdom can you share with them?
I'm not really qualified, guys. I'll tell you that much. We're all on the same level. I think that's something that has really worked for me, is remembering that once you graduate from college, you are on the same plane as the person that you've been looking up to for the past 4 years in school. For me, at my age, it was Jeremy Jordan. And I was like, I'm going to go for Jeremy Jordan. I'm going to try to get all of his stuff. Or Derek. And I'm going to go for Derek Clinton's stuff. If I see a part or if I see his understudy, I'm going to gun for it. And that was like a plan I came out with, where we had a lot of people in school where they were idolizing the people in our business on Broadway. And when you get into those situations, if you start like fangirling over a director or a music director, and then you get them in the audition room. Like one of my very first auditions, I was auditioning with really famous people to me. It was like Ariel Jacobs was my scene partner. And like, how do you react to somebody who you kind of studied? And it was a big learning curve to be like, okay, we're all on the same plane now. We're all professional actors. So that was my first big lesson. If you would have asked me this like a few years ago, when I teach classes and when I tell people who ask me like, what are like concrete things you can do when you're moving to New York City? One, don't move without either one of the two, an agent or your equity card. And that kind of, this is getting real technical real fast. It kind of, all the horror stories you hear about cattle calls, 6 a.m.s where you wait all day and they get to 401 and you're 402 and they're like, okay, that's all for the day. You can avoid all of that by being an equity member, because then you can sign up online and get a slot, or your agent who just would be like, hey, Zach, you have an audition for Wicked, 3 o'clock on Wednesday. And then when you have a day job, you can be like, hey guys, I need 3 o'clock on Wednesday off. I got an audition. And they're like, great, switch it with somebody else. Trust me, those things make it so much easier. And so if you're not in the music theater program and you want to move to New York, you want to go and you want to get into an agent showcase in the city. It's the same thing we do at BW, but it's a class you take over a few weeks. They do bring in agents to critique you and do certain things. But if you're not in the program and you don't have the capability of these two gentlemen right here, which are going to be meeting with the best casting and agents in the business, that's why BW is so fantastic, is that you want to do one of those programs when you get there, okay? Those are concrete things you can do before moving there. Also, know your neighborhoods. Jahir has a little bit of an upper hand there, but know your neighborhood before you move. You want to do a lot of research of where you're moving to. But long story short, just I think one thing that BW is really great is packaging a really, really great person. So how your look matches your voice, matches your acting, matches how you present yourself. But something I've kind of learned over the years is always have your flip. I guess that's what I will call it. I present as a cis, straight, white, leading man. Great. What's my flip? I like non-binary clothes. I like to take pictures in them. I really like music. I like writing my own music. I'm quite partial to, you know, being weird all the time, as you guys probably got from this conversation. And when people meet me, it's the flip. That's the flip, where you kind of think I'm going to be a dick when you meet me the first time, but really I'm just a nerd. And that's what I try to lead with as much as possible, because nobody wants to work with a dick. So work on your flips. That's what I'll say. I hope that made sense to all the people leaving this conversation as I speak.
Know your neighborhoods and work on your flips. I am not going to forget that. Well, we have come to the end of our conversation, and Eric, Jair, Zach, thank you so much for so openly sharing about your experiences, whether it is right now or whether it was from 2012. Thank you for sharing it with each other. For sure, it's been a delight to watch you talk with each other, but to have such a great group listening in. A reminder to our audience, you can view the first 2 installments of Those You've Known at conversation.bw.edu. As well, that is where you can get tickets for the streaming of Spring Awakening. And just within the last couple of hours, there is some great press on BWMT that is available in American Theater Magazine, and that is at americantheater.org. Thank you all for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.